Welcome to another episode of the Heart of Law podcast. My name is Mirena Umizaj, and I am your host. I designed this platform to invite lawyers and other professionals in the legal field to talk about how they have changed law and how law has changed their life experience. In the end, victories and losses, joy and tragedy come our way to expand and stretch our survival skills, but also deepen us and give life meaning. The truth is, the legal field is run by the law of the jungle. The best woman or man takes home the prize, and not everyone makes it. Intellect is necessary, but not enough. Talent is a great advantage, but not required. What determines success in the long run is grit, the ability to stick with your future every single day. And in the perspective of every person lies a lens through which we may better understand ourselves, which is why I love doing this show. My guest today is Howard Nations, a legendary trial lawyer from Houston, Texas, who has been practicing law since 1966. He has owned his own firm for 50 years. He's referred to in our space as the godfather of mass torts. Howard went to Vanderbilt University School of Law. He is board certified to practice personal injury, civil law, and civil trial advocacy. He specializes in pharmaceutical, medical devices, and MDL litigation. Howard, welcome to the Heart of Law podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Mirena. How are you?
I'm well. It's a pleasure to have you on, Howard. I know you're a very private person, so I feel honored that you accepted my invite. So are you ready to tell me all of your secrets?
Oh, absolutely.
Good. So you have historically always had a big law firm, Howard, and with over 100 people or employees. Is that still the case with COVID-19? How has your firm morphed since the global pandemic?
It's not directly as a result of COVID, or not completely as a result of COVID, but I went from 151 employees down to currently around 60. But the advent of COVID coincided with me closing out a very big piece of litigation. So the reduction of staff by about 90 people came more as a result of closing out the litigation than it did as a result of COVID. But then when COVID came along, you also have the aspect that since February of last year, my entire firm has been practicing remotely. Mm-hmm. And so I had to set up 60 home units, a complete setup for my clerks and case managers at their home, with the whole computer, the printer, the scanner, everything at home, just the same as they have at the office. So that was quite a move to get that set up. But now that I've gotten them at home for a year practicing, they don't want to come back to the office. So I'm sitting in the office now. This is our focus group room, and I'm sitting in here now, and I'm kind of lonely. I'm the only person in the building besides the people in my office right here.
So do you think people are more productive now that they're working from home, or is it the same?
I can tell you that the ones that are still with me after a year are productive, and they're still with me because they're productive.
Yeah.
We had an excellent experience with it, because we probably lost 3 to 4 people over the last year who were gaming the system. But you can tell if you have your people trained right and they have their assignments, it's not hard to tell who's productive. They either produce what they're supposed to or they don't. Mm-hmm. And so we can keep, you put them out there, you trust them, you train them, you trust them, and let them go. And then you look for the production, and the production's been excellent. Absolutely excellent.
So do you think you want to keep it this way, or do you see?
Well, I reduced my office space considerably. Fortunately, I had a new lease in January. So it was expiring at just the right time. So I've reduced my office space considerably, and I have about 40% of what I had before. And so that's going to work well. But now I've got a ton of office up here, and I don't have anybody working in it except me and the administrative people come in. And soon I've got to hire probably 3 more lawyers. And as soon as I get all the lawyer staff back together with the ones I have now, then we'll probably put the lawyers will be using the office. We have conference rooms and offices and the whole thing. And the lawyers will probably be using the offices, and then just certain staff members, because as long as the staff people function effectively and they get their job done, I'm perfectly fine with them remaining at home.
Okay. So for those who are listening and want to work with Howard Nations, they send in a resume. That's wonderful. Okay, good to know. I think that has been the general consensus amongst the people that I've been speaking with, attorneys in general, that even though it was a rough beginning, trying to transition everybody to work from home remotely, I think people overall are actually okay with it. It provides some freedom and flexibility for, people that have families and children and that need that flexibility, but can also get their job done and take it seriously. So it seems to jive with what I've been hearing in the space. So Howard, take me to your early beginnings. Before becoming a lawyer, you were in the U.S. Army military intelligence as a Russian linguist. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I thought so. Sounds dangerous.
No, I was trained in the military. When I went in, we did a bunch of testing and to figure out where you're going to fit. And I did pretty well in linguistics. So they sent me to the Army Language School to study Russian. And then after language school and some other training, they shipped us off to speaking Russian. Obviously, they sent us to Korea.
Yeah.
And people who studied Korea went to Germany. So, it's the Army. So we were sitting on the border. People don't realize it, but Japan and Russia are actually less than a mile apart. Mm-hmm. There's an island off the coast of Hokkaido, which is a Russian island, and Hokkaido is the northernmost point in Japan. Mm-hmm. So we had bases there, and we could literally watch these guys playing volleyball on their island, and but we could also hear them. Mm-hmm. And we were eavesdropping on Vladivostok and all that whole Manchuria, that whole area. Yeah. And we were eavesdropping on Russian water traffic, the underwater, the submarines and the fleet and all that sort of thing. So it was pretty interesting. It was a pretty heated up Cold War at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you learn Russian? Did you become fluent? Are you still fluent?
Yeah, I did. I mean, we did nothing but that's all you do is they figure that you're on a 45-hour a week deal. You get 30 hours a week of classwork, and then you get 15 hours of homework. So you figure it's a 45-week deal. And so then you go for 6 months. And all of our teachers were native-born Russians. And you could tell they have different accents the same way. Americans have different accents. So I could speak Russian, and the people I talked to from Russia would know where my instructor came from, Yeah. And ironically, my instructor was from Georgia, and so was I. But it was very good training. It was excellent training, but more than anything else, it was 6 of the most important months of my life, because what Russian linguist, what the school did for me, the Russian language school did for me, is it made me an excellent student. And it taught me extremely good habits that carried me all the way through law school and beyond. Because in the military, it's all the difference in the world from going to college. I'm a 19-year-old kid, and it's, when you go to college, you wake up in the morning, you don't quite feel like going to class, you don't go to class. Well, in the military,
you don't
miss anything. You're never late for a class. First of all, you wake up at 4:30 in the morning go out to stand in and answer the roll, and everything is routine. But then you never miss a class. You never fail to have your homework. You never think about copying somebody else's paper. You never even dream of not turning in an assignment on time. I mean, all those things that you absolutely have to do, which is what everybody should do anyway. But in the military, you have to do them. Yeah. And the result of that was I developed those habits. And those habits served me well because I continued that process. I continued it through Japan and through Korea, and then all the way back in military intelligence here. And then in college, I just did the same thing. I got up at 4:30 every morning and did my work. And I continued that routine, and I did my work on time. And I didn't procrastinate, which is the biggest sin of students, of course. I didn't procrastinate because I didn't have time to. And so it got me through. I went through 4 years of college in 3 years. And then I went to law school for 3 years. And so for that 6 years of education, I applied the good habits that I had learned at the Army Language School. There were 6 of the most important months of my life.
Wow. You've shared with me before that you once were a single event trial lawyer.
Yeah.
But once tort reform happened in Texas and you had no choice but to adapt and reinvent and change the way you were doing things, you started a mass tort firm and the entire game changed. What I'm most interested to hear, and like while you're speaking about what shaped you and created character, I'm interested to hear how you created this shift in your career, in your business practice. Was there a breakthrough there for you? Like how did that all unfold?
Well, I told my favorite opponent, he was a lobbyist for the insurance industry.
Yeah.
And I fought him all the time at the legislature in the legislative battles. And he said, I'm going to put you out of business someday. And I said, well, good luck with that. So at the time, I had 5 lawyers, and our docket was about 35 cases. Of course, every case, they were all catastrophic injury or major event cases. We didn't have anything but that. So, and my personal docket was generally 2 cases. It'd be the next one coming up for trial and maybe the next one after that. And then I would consult on the rest of them. And so, I mean, I had a pretty ideal setup, and it was working extremely well. But I only had 35 cases on my docket for 5 lawyers. So tort reform came along, and I preached for years in my speeches. I said, if the Republicans ever get control of the governorship, the lieutenant governorship, and the Supreme Court all at the same time, we're dead in the water. And I'd be trying to get trial lawyers to contribute to Democrats to keep this thing going. And, oh, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And to me, the term Republican trial lawyer is the ultimate oxymoron with the emphasis on moron. But so my MDJD that worked with me had been with me for 25 years, and he's a Republican. And I kept telling him, I said, your party's going to put me out of business one day. So I was up at the legislature doing a little lobbying, and I read the bill that was being proposed on medical negligence. And it hadn't been put up for a vote yet, but I could count noses pretty easily. And so I went back home walked in his office and I said, okay, we've taken our last medical negligence case. We're through. We're out of the business. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, just like I told you, your friends in the Republican Party are going to put us out of business because we passed the most egregious malpractice bill since Indiana. It was just horrible.
Yeah.
And actually, since then, I've only tried one malpractice case, and that was in 2003. And I've tried one malpractice case since then, and that was one that was held over from the pre-reform days. But I said, well, your Republican friends have put us out of business. He said, no, that's not possible. I said, well, let me just tell you, we're done with it. We're through. And so I realized then that they were going to apply this. They were going to be even more fortunate than malpractice, and they were applying this to torts across the board. And so I realized that there's no place for a majority. Someone who does nothing but the big cases, big litigation. We're not going to have a place anymore in Texas. It's just not going to be available to us. There are going to be limitations of every type. And so I said, okay, well, I guess I declared myself to be a mass tort lawyer.
Yeah.
So I started.
Or did you do your research and you try to identify what you were going to do next?
Yeah, I had to decide which one I was going to get into. And so I looked around, and Zyprexa was still around, and they had had two settlements on Zyprexa already. And I took a bit of a risk because I was telling my guy doing some gathering with me, I said, I want to take Zyprexa cases. And he said, no, the statute of limitations already run. And I said, no, they're not going to search statute of limitations where I'll make it cost more for them to prosecute a summary judgment than it would be to pay me. So I started taking Zyprexa cases when everybody else is closing them out. Mm-hmm. And they've already had one major settlement, and then they've had a second settlement. And now they've saying there's not going to be any more. They've told the judge there's not going to be any more settlements. And so I started gathering, and I got 216 cases. And so I told them, and I got appointed to the plaintiff steering committee. Mm-hmm. And I picked, and the judge came on one day, and as we were closing it out, he just finished up his second settlement. He said, how many cases are left? And so the clerk had it all right, all figured out. She said there are 1,200 cases left. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, let's do this. And he said, Mr. Nations is here. He has 216 cases. So the judge thought he would intimidate me into settlement. So he said, well, I'll tell you what we used to do. We used to try cases 30 at a time in asbestos. And he said, so why don't we do this? This is July. He said, why don't we set cases for October, and we'll set 30 of them for trial in October. And let's do that. And so I stepped up and said, Your Honor, since I'm the last remaining member of the plaintiff steering committee, I would request that all 30 of those be my cases. And he said, well, I don't think you're going to find anybody that's going to be fighting you for that honor. So let's do it. So I had 30 cases chosen as bellwethers on the spot to be tried in 3 months. Wow. So over the next 3 months, we took 78 depositions all over the country. As Pepper Hamilton was on the other side. We took 78 depositions all over the country. We did Daubert, we did everything. And we came down, and then the other side, Pepper Hamilton, moved to have the case continued because they said they couldn't be ready. And so they moved it to February. So in January, Pepper Hamilton called me and they said, we want to mediate. And I said, no. And they said, no. And they said, no, we want to, why? And I said, you want to mediate so you can tell the judge that you've tried diligently to settle this case at mediation with Mr. Nations, and that he's just a hard-headed SOB who won't settle. So why don't we skip all that, and I give you my permission to tell the judge that I'm a hard-headed SOB who won't settle, and we can do it without all the cost. And so we went right on into January, and they finally called me and said, okay, we really want to talk to you. So I said, okay, but I'll only talk to the man with the checkbook in his hand. I got to meet with your general counsel, the man who has the authorization to make a settlement. So then they came back and said, okay, long story short, we got that meeting scheduled. So I went in and sat down for that meeting, and he starts off by saying, okay, so you have 215 cases. And I said, no, I don't. He said, well, how many do you have? And I said, I have 1,203. And he's like, oh, what? And he just went ballistic. And I said, you don't think I've really been spending all this money doing all these depositions and everything else, and I haven't bothered to gather any more cases?
Yeah.
I said, I have 1,203 cases. And so anyway, long story short, after that, we managed to negotiate, and this is strange, because the negotiation came down to not how much they'll pay. The negotiation started out with, how many cases will you pay me on? And so they finally agreed that they would pay me on 999 cases. And they said, because they'd said, we'll never pay you on 1,000 cases. I said, okay, then pay me on 999. So they did, they agreed. And so they're like, but how are you going to get rid of your cases? How are you? I said, that's my problem. I said, I will settle 999 cases with you. I said, so we left the office. I shouldn't tell this story because the rest of it's funny, but we left the office, and my co-counsel who worked for me looked over and said, we don't have 999 cases. And I said, no, but we will by Friday. We only had like 549 cases. Wow. And I settled 999.
And that was your first experience in mass torts?
Yeah. And so we got on the phone. We came back and got on the phone, and we called the people who had the 1,200 cases, the rest of the cases, and said, look, here's the deal. You can tag on to this settlement, which was extremely good. Yeah. You can tag on to this settlement. You do all the work with the plaintiff. All you do is send me names, social security numbers, and nature of the injury, and send me a spreadsheet. And so we gathered up. We could have gotten all 1,200 if we wanted, but we signed up. We picked the 999 cases we wanted to submit, and we submitted by Friday. We gave them a spreadsheet with 999 cases on it, and they paid us top dollar on all 999, and they felt great because they had beat me out of 200 cases. Okay.
And this is why you are Howard Nations. I mean, this is how.
Well, it was a good way to start because, first of all, I got some very grateful referring attorneys, because these guys are stranded out there with 20 cases and 10 cases, and they weren't going to talk to anybody else. They were through. And so these guys turned into really good referring. When I called them out of the blue and said, you're going to get I'll give you X $100 per case to give it. Oh my God, yes. So they were lined up to get in on that settlement, and they became extremely good referring attorneys. So that was my first venture into mass torts, and it was obviously it was a multi-million-dollar settlement. Yeah.
What do you think it takes for a lawyer to be a mass tort attorney? Because it's a very, we say it's a different breed.
Well, it is.
So, today, for example, not everybody's a trial lawyer in the sense that people don't, always take cases to trial and work up the cases as if they're going to trial. It's a very different world, but
it is a different world.
Develop this style where you only get involved in cases that you're going to be in a leadership position and you're going to try the case. And so, that's why you're known to be somebody that gets top dollar for his cases. But what do you think an attorney needs to have, if you could share the ingredients, so to speak, with our...
Well, the first thing is you have to have an absolute disregard for money, because if you worry about money, don't get in the mass tort business, because there's a complete total expulsion of money. You do away with it. You just get everything you got goes into the cases. And if you stop and think, oh my God, how much have I got in these cases? It's just, it's crazy. And so the second thing is you have to be fearless, because if you're not fearless, you'll worry yourself to death. And you have to be skilled, because you have to have a really good sense of what's going on, because the first key to it is, what do you invest in? What cases do you gather? And because the outcomes are only as good as what you gather. In my case, I chose to gather Zyprexa against all the better advice of people telling me, no, that's over. But that's what made it so easy to gather, because it was over. Nobody else was trying to get them. And so I got 200 cases immediately. But you have to have skill sets that for a trial, you have to have a lot of skills in depositions, because depositions are a crucial part of mass torts. You have to be articulate with experts, because choosing the right expert, getting them prepared, just keeping them under control is a major part of mass torts. And you have to have the world's greatest patience. You have to have
a long time.
You have to have more patience than any doctor because it's all patience, because it's a 5-year proposition. If you're sitting here signing up, if you decide today you're gonna get into whatever, you pick a medical device today, you're looking at money going out in 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. And if you really, if it works just right, you'll get paid back in 26, maybe late 25. I mean, we just wrapped up our BART IVC. We started BART IVC in the first meeting on September 15th, of 15.
Right. Okay.
2015.
Wow.
We met in West Palm Beach on September 15th, and we're closing out the case right now. I'm doing the common benefit work on it right now. So I'm 6 years later.
So how does a lawyer get in leadership position? Because it's not, you don't just wake up one day, you decide you want to do mass torts, you open a shop, you hire the staff, you get the cases. There's many ways to get the cases. Assuming that you get the right cases, if it's a young lawyer trying to break into the space, how can somebody, get in a leadership position and actually try cases in mass tort?
Well, you're not picked by the court. You're technically assigned by the court, but you're picked by the people who are putting the MDL together, putting the PSC together, and the lawyers putting together the PSC will put you on the PSC because they think you're meritorious. They think you're going to be a hard worker. You're skilled. You got the money to back it up. You got the patience to back it up. You're not going to fall out of it 2 years into it. But the lawyers pick who they want to be their co-counsel. And you don't have to be a trial lawyer to be on a PSC. You can be, a real trial lawyer. There are a lot of roles in the PSC. Sure. You can be an extremely good researcher. You can be a document reviewer. Usually you're not on the PSC when you do that, but if you start out by doing document review work, and you review a group of documents, you're given one company executive or something and to go review all their documents. And then if it works out right, you're training to take that person's deposition. Yeah. So you go take that deposition, you do a good job with it, then you start getting noticed. and then they bring you along to the next one, and you work your way through by doing extremely good work.
Yeah.
You work your way through by doing extremely good work in legal study, in briefing. There are lots of skill sets that are required for a real trial, and we all have to have really good lawyers backing us up,
Yeah.
And so we're looking.
That just want to get in the business side of things. They don't necessarily want to litigate. They don't want to do the day-to-day, but they are, so to speak, investors. And
that's easy. Okay, so then you have the investors who, I think I would characterize it more as gamblers than investors. But you just gather cases, and then you work them up, and then you can either refer them to somebody and take a referral fee. If you're a young lawyer, you can refer them to somebody and take a referral fee, or you can refer them to some trial lawyer and say, look, I'll refer you these cases, but I want to work with you on them. I don't want to just give them to you and have you send me a referral fee. I want to learn how you do this. And so you can get a lawyer to work with you and train you and let you follow your own cases through it. You get the cases by having the right person, by investing in the right company to gather cases for you. Right. And I personally don't. I would stay away from leads myself. I never ever buy leads. You'll find out especially where non-lawyer groups are advertising for leads. Right. And so you got non-lawyers signing up to claim it. And then they gather those up until they get a whole group of leads, and they'll say, okay, I'll sell you 100 leads for X number of dollars per lead. And what happens a lot of times, a young lawyer will buy that, and they start calling the leads and they can't convert them. And when you're making calls, you find out, no, I've already told them no. I've don't call me again. I've told them 5 times. Yeah. And you find out that you're working leads that have already been worked by somebody else. Right. So those leads didn't get them signed up. The last lawyer didn't sign them up. So a lead guy's they're gonna sell them again to you. But you're better off putting the money into advertising with somebody who will bring you a contract, not a lead.
Named contracts,
yeah.
And these are more expensive, but you're
not in the long run.
Right, in the sense more expensive than the leads.
Yeah.
But you're guaranteed a client. And so assuming, you get 100 retained contracts and 10 or 15 or 20 fall off, then what happens? What's your experience there?
Well, that's going to happen. So, you're going to have some fall off because you're going to find one of the things you do before you start that process is you have to ask yourself and figure it out. What is it going to take to get me to a signed contract of a case where I know this is the right product and I know that it's the right injury and I know I have a good lawsuit? Yeah. Because you may have someone tell you, look, I can get you 100 of these IVC filter cases for X number of dollars. Okay, so they bring you 100 IVC cases. Well, first of all, an IVC case in and of itself doesn't mean anything until you discover who's the manufacturer. So how do you do that? Well, you got to do product ID. Well, product ID involves obtaining the medical records, or at least working with the medical provider to get you the identity. Sometimes you can just talk them into looking for the strip in the medical records and send it to you. But usually you have to buy the surgical records at least on when it was implanted. And then you find out what kind of product it was. Was it a Cook? Was it a Bard? Was it a Argon? Was it Cordis? So until you get to there, you don't have a lawsuit until you get to one. It may be one of several other kinds. It might be a Braun, which nobody's prosecuting. So that's the first thing is Now, how much is it going to cost me? Okay, I got to buy medical records. Now what you have is you have a barred case, but you still don't know what you have because you don't know what the injury is. I had a barred case implanted on this date and this time, and I was having this kind of problem. And so then to find out what the injury is, then you got to do a CAT scan. Mm-hmm. And we worked the thing out. I was working it out with hundreds of cases. And that is, you have to have them reviewed by an interventional radiologist to read. You got to do the CAT scan. Mm-hmm. And then you got to have it read by an interventional radiologist who will tell you there's no defect in here, there's no flaw in here. Or they'll tell you, well, you got a strut missing. Oh, here it is. It's in the heart. Mm-hmm. So by the time you do all that, by the time you do your advertising, then you get your medical records, then you get a CAT scan, then you get a doctor to read the CAT scan. You're $1,500, $2,000 into the case now already. Mm-hmm. So it may have cost you $250 to get the case, but then you still don't have anything until you do all those other steps. So before you go in and try to figure out what a case is worth or what you want to get into, you want to know the bottom line on what is it going to cost me to find out if I have a lawsuit. What's it going to cost me to have a real case?
How does one financially support that process if, they have a line of credit at the bank around the corner and it's expensive? How does somebody ramp up and scale when you
won't get that kind of loan? You won't get that kind of loan from a bank because it's too speculative. Banks can't do that because those cases are not valid collateral, because the bankers know from experience that it's going to take you 5 years to get that case converted to cash. And so they won't loan you the money. But the mass tort world is overflowing with people now. Even hedge funds are involved in it. The hedge funds have gotten into it where you can borrow money from them. And you can borrow money from all sorts of people who are in the industry. The interest rate is very high. Yeah. And you think, why would I ever pay 20% interest on a loan to get cases? Mm-hmm. And the answer is because you make a profit of 200% or 300% mm-hmm. on the case itself.
Yeah.
So, if you get a case and you put $2,000 into it and you settle it for $10,000, you can afford that. Of course, you're settling it. You have to remember you're settling it 5 years later.
Right.
And you also had 5 years of interest in there. Right. And that doesn't sound like, when you talk about one case, it's not a big deal, but I have, I get thousands of cases. When I get 10,000 cases, and it's going to cost me $1,500 with each one mm-hmm. just to find out if it's a real case or what the injury is. I mean, that's, like Everett Dirksen said, after a while, you're talking some real money. Yeah. And so you're talking in terms of hundreds of thousands of dollars and tens of thousands. Mm-hmm. The other way is just to invest, borrow some money, invest, and refer the case to someone who will do all that for you. Mm-hmm. You refer the case out and to someone who will pay for the CAT scan and the read and all that sort of thing. And then if you got a case, then you've got a referral fee. If you don't have a case, you both lost money. Mm-hmm. So, but that takes the burden off of the lawyer, of the young lawyer from having to first just put up so much money to get that deeply invested.
Too much risk, right? So you need to, as a lawyer, I think you need to have the ability to sustain that volatility in your, finances, because it is, like you said, it's feast or famine. And a lot of attorneys, as I'm in the business of deploying capital to law firms. And what I've seen is that a lot of attorneys who can tolerate it are attorneys that really understand the business.
Yeah.
People typically shy away because they don't know how the model works. And so one of the smartest things that you've taught me in this process, and over the course of many years that we've worked together, is that why use my own money when I can borrow somebody else's money and take a risk with their capital to grow the firm and work up the cases? And I thought, that makes so much sense. That's become now one of my, pitching sentences.
It's called OPM, other people's money. You always spend other people's money.
Yeah. Raising debt is not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to have the stamina, you have to be able to understand how that works and take it on without, the fear that can come with it. So what is not taught in law school is how to run the business, how to make business decisions when you are running and you're operating a law firm. Because it's one thing to be a lawyer, and it's another thing to be a business person. It's almost like you have to be this entrepreneur. You have to break out of the mold and the limitations of what being an attorney means. And you have to reinvent yourself if you're going to be in this space. I mean, it's a very unique space. You're a talented lawyer and a very sophisticated business man and operator of the firm. How can lawyers learn how to do that? I know you mentioned some of the steps, but what if you could condense it? What would you say?
Well, I started you're familiar with the summit that we do every year in South Beach. Mm-hmm. We're in the 10th year this year. Okay, I started that program. I created that entire program 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I did the first one 10 years ago. And the very first thing we did on the first day of the summit, one of the things that made it different was the first half day. It was a 4-day program, but 4-day program. And the first half day on Monday morning, it was a program I call the entrepreneurship of law.
Yeah.
Okay. And we got people in who were speaking, who was explaining the various aspects of the legal aspects, financial aspects of law. Mm-hmm. And then we got 3 lawyers. We got me, Mike Papantonio, and Mike Berg. Mm-hmm. And we finished up the morning just as a panel of 3 where people could just ask us questions about how do you do this in your firm? How do you do that in your firm? Where do you get started? So, but we had a good CLE on that. And and we did it with some vendors, but mostly I didn't use vendors because they turn it into a sales pitch. But we use people who use vendors, and they'll explain to you what the vendors can do and what you should do. Here's where you should borrow. Here's where you shouldn't borrow. And the thing about that is this is an ever evolving business. There's nothing static about mass torts. It changes all the time. For example, the latest advent has been the introduction. We came to the attention of the world of the guys with the small, with huge bucks, the hedge funds who make $100 million loans. Mm-hmm. And some of these guys have come in and they come in. This is the latest thing. They come in and say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I will loan you. I'll pay all the costs, and I'll loan you up to $100 million. Mm-hmm. And I'll pay everything. I'll pay the cost of acquisition of the cases. I'll pay all the cost of depositions and everything. I'll pay all the cost. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, we split the fee 50-50. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that ethically in most places, but if you're a member of the DC bar, you can. Mm-hmm. You can split your fee with a non-lawyer.
Do you think that's it's a okay approach? Are you against it?
Well, I wouldn't do it, but it's a lot of guys are doing it and they're doing it okay, but I wouldn't do it. And I'm a member of the DC bar, so I could do it legally because I'm admitted in DC.
You want to partner together?
I wouldn't. You got $100 million you don't need?
I can find it.
But I've warned against it because when you got to take this example, you got a hedge fund and they're invested in all sorts of things and you're just one of their investments. Mm-hmm. And they loan you $50 million and you're suing Bard
or BP.
And as you're moving ahead in your litigation, all of a sudden Bard gets bought out by a new company. Mm-hmm. And the new company, which Bard did, they get bought out by a big conglomerate company. Mm-hmm. And so here you are, you're ready to go to trial and get punitive damage awards against them. But your partners who are invested all over the place, they're heavy investors in the new company who just bought Bard.
Right.
So now you're suing them. Now your partners have a conflict of interest because they're financing you and you're suing another company that they are heavily invested in. Mm-hmm. And so they come to you and say, look, your case is small potatoes to us as an investor over here. So we want you to settle that case. We want you to settle that case for 50 cents on the dollar just to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. And what do? Mm-hmm. They're calling all the shots because they're a 50% partner. They say, if you don't settle that for this amount of money, we're not going to fund it anymore. You will settle it. So now you have conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. And that kind of thing you get into, and the hedge fund's going to go wherever their biggest pot of gold is. And it's easy to get into conflicts right there. And now you have just put your clients in a very bad position, mm-hmm. So I just don't give away that kind of control of the docket.
Yeah. So
it's nice to spend all that money and not worry about it. It's nice just to order your advertising $500,000 at a time, which is what they do.
Right.
They do a $500,000 buy on advertising at a time. Mm-hmm. And, they unlimited how many offices you can open around the country, how many lawyers you have. And it's just that you got to pay the piper at some point. So it's not worth it.
Yeah. How do you think the mass tort world, the trend of evolution is going? What do you project or foresee will happen in the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years in this space?
Well, I think what's going to happen at some point in time is that the bar is going to tighten up on how this is run. Because as soon as the bar finds out, the collective bar finds out mm-hmm. that you have non-lawyers making major decisions on behalf of clients.
Right.
And when you find out that, and this will make me really popular with the with the advertisers, but the whole idea that the guys who are gathering leads are talking to clients. They're advertising for clients. They're not lawyers. They're advertising for clients. They're certainly leading the client to believe that they're lawyers. And then they get that contract signed up, and that contract and that client becomes a commodity.
Yeah.
And then they gather up 200 of those at one time, and they'll sell 200 leads to a lawyer. And their major interest is who can afford to pay me for 200 leads. Their interest is not who's the best lawyer I can take this to for the benefit of the clients that I've signed up, because they're not my clients. They're commodities. Mm-hmm. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why that is not the unauthorized practice of law. Mm-hmm. And at some point in time, there's going to be enough pressure from industry to go after those guys with the Bar Association. Industry is going to figure out that, wow, we just had to settle 8,000 cases and 5,000 of them came off of people who are not lawyers advertising, because they're doing everything they can right now to fight advertising. Mm-hmm. And to fight and to go back against the lawyers who are advertising. In the bar litigation, they came at us on discovery. They wanted to know where everybody got their cases. Mm-hmm. And we told them which depth of hell they could go to on that one. But they're going to find a federal judge that's going to say, okay, yeah. And so it's going to happen that the lawyers are going to get fed up with it, or the Bar Association is going to get fed up with it and take action against these people who are not lawyers, who I think are practicing law without a license. That's one change. The other change is in the financing field. And the financing field, you get a small firm that's putting up, that'll loan out $1 million. They're not even in the game anymore, because you got the big financiers and the hedge funds and others who are saying, I'll give you 50 million unless you want 75. How much would you like? That sort of thing. And they're gaining undue influence in the industry, a lot of influence in the industry.
Many say, in that vein where you said clients are treated as commodities, and it is a business, and it's comes across very transactional. So many say, and just to play a little bit of a devil's advocate here, that the only winners in mass torts or class action are the attorneys, that there is no real quality of client care in an MDL. The clients don't typically end up with a lot of money. What is your reaction to that?
That's not even close to being true. In fact, the exact opposite is true. The advantage of the MDL is you take one individual lady. I'll give you an example. We just represented a lady who she lives in Atlanta, and she's a very nice young woman, and she had a IVC filter installed, and one of the arms broke off and went to her heart. And she had a strut in her heart, which can kill you in an instant. Okay. Now, let's say that she knows this. Let's say she figures that out. She goes to an individual lawyer who figures out, wow, you got a strut in your heart. Why don't we do this? Let me figure out who it is. We don't know anything about it, but let me figure out what company it is, and let me figure out what I can do for you. So the lawyer comes back and says, I've looked at this, and you got a strut in your heart, and it may kill you. But for me to prosecute that case successfully is going to cost $1 million. And actually, to be exact, it cost us $1,560,000 to prosecute that case. But so if that woman and that lawyer had to prosecute that case without an MDL, she'd just have to wait until she died from the strut in her heart, because she couldn't afford to prosecute the case. There would never be any action taken against the company. The company would never be motivated to improve the product. They'd never be motivated to take the product off the market, for damn sure. But the fact that you say, well, there may be other cases like this out there, and you start reading the literature and you start reading the filings with the FDA, and you find out, wow, there are a bunch of these. So now you bring this, you take it to court, you bring it as an MDL, you go to the JPML, you get assigned, and you put the word out to other lawyers. You call friends and say, look, this is going to be a good MDL, get into it. And so then you get into it, and then you take that $1,560,000 in expenses, and you spread it over 10,000 people who now have those cases. And so now that expense is nominal compared to the amount of the settlement.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about settlements in the hundreds of millions, for which that $1,560,000 is nominal. But without the MDL, that woman could never have prosecuted that case, ever.
But you would agree with me that, because I see this across the country with firms that have hundreds or thousands of cases at a time, it is very difficult to provide adequate service to, say, 2,000 people if you've got, a law firm of, say, 50 people. The retention is an issue. So a lot of people drop out. Sometimes people are just simply not happy because they don't get somebody on the phone, or they don't get to speak to an attorney all the time. How do you, I know that you have a unique approach, and that you have people to make sure that are touching every single client that you have. But typically in the business, that is an issue. And so it affects the clients, it affects the business. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if the issue is answering clients' phone calls, that's true, but that's not the issue, because you explain to the client in the very first conversation that this is going to take 4 or 5 years. Your case is not going to be coming up for a very long time. There's going to be nothing. If there's something to report on your case, we will tell you about it. And then in my case, handling 2,000 cases with 50 people would be like a weekend off. When I got up, I told you I was at 151 employees a couple of years ago. The reason for that was, at the time I had 151 employees, I had 36,000 clients at the same time. And I did that with 151 employees. We ramped up to 151 to handle those clients. But we moved those clients through, and we were in an MDL, and we pushed those cases through very efficiently. Every single one of those people had a case manager assigned to them who was familiar with their case. And if they called in, their particular case manager would respond to them. We got everybody handled, and we got into it on May 8th, and within 16 months, we closed it out. We closed it in 16 months, and we collected actual money, not judgments that never go anywhere. We collected $154 million on that.
Yeah.
And so that's just a that's just a matter of doing it right. That's just a matter of knowing what you're doing, and having the proper protocols in place, and having the nerve to take on that was BP, having the nerve to take on somebody like BP when you've got and to take on 16,000 plaintiffs.
Yeah.
But that can be done. That's when we got to the 36,000 clients. And I told the guy I mentioned to you first, who's the lobbyist for the defense here in Texas. I ran into him and I told him, I said, I ran into him and I said, he said, how's it going? I said, well, it's going great, actually. I said, but you haven't done it. You weren't very successful. He said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you said you were going to put me out of business. At the time you told me that, I had 5 lawyers and 35 cases on my docket. Now I have 36,000 cases on my docket, and as many lawyers as I ever need. And so I don't think you were successful. You haven't successfully put me out of business. You're just giving me a lot more clients to represent. But and put a lot of zeros on the end of the recoveries. So if you decide you want to put me any further out of business, let me know. But no, you can do. You obviously don't give the same care that you do if you're handling a one-off case as when they had 35 clients. But the fact of the matter is,
you're helping people. We
also had 16,000 people sharing cost.
Yeah.
So the cost to each individual plaintiff gets down to be about $40 or $50.
Yeah.
As opposed to being so prohibitive that you can't prosecute the case. You're sharing cost, and you're sharing, for example, the expenses. I do one graphic in the Bard IBC filter cases. I did one graphic, and it cost $38,000 for the graphic. But then we had a whole bunch of people who used that graphic. We used it in their cases, and then we also could make very small modification for a different client if it were going to go to trial, because you've got all the basic fundamental flaws in there, and then you just modify it to the specifics of this case, and you may be able to modify it for $2,000, $3,000 once you pay the initial $39,000 to build it. And so, but something like that, you spread the cost of that. In that case, I was spreading the cost of it over 600 clients.
Right. So it makes a difference. Yeah.
Sure.
So is this something you want to do for much longer, or are you getting involved in new projects? Or
well, we're getting involved in new drugs and new devices. I mean, the thing about the pharmaceutical industry is so reliable. We can always rely on them to be killing people and to be injuring people and to be disregarding the safety of people and to be cheating. And so they will always do it. And then to top it off, we can also rely on them to document it for us in emails. So yeah, it will. I plan to. I'm just getting started in my career. I'm just starting to figure out what I'm doing. So I think I'll stay with it for a while.
You'll stick with it. That's great. So I want to shift gears just a little. When you and I met, I want to say around 2012, 2013, I was going through a pretty difficult time in my life at the time. And you became a mentor to me, someone that I could ask for guidance. And you ended up sponsoring me to a self-development seminar.
I did.
That it was called Unleash the Power Within by Tony Robbins.
Right.
Which was the beginning of a new chapter for me in my life.
Yeah.
Since then, I've gone to over 10 events around the world, and I never forgot that act of kindness. I've paid it forward many, many times in an effort to try and do what you did for me. And I realized that the key to living an abundant life is to contribute and add value to other people. I learned that from you. So I want to thank you on the record for such a wonderful gesture. Everybody knows that you have a big heart, that you throw the best parties in the business. What are some ways that, other than, what I just mentioned, what other ways do you find to bring fulfillment into the mix? Because you're already successful and you have been for a very long time. How do you bring fulfillment to your success? What is important to you? Well,
that's easy. Because I tell everything I know. I share everything I know because I've been on the speaking circuit. I gave my first CLE talk. I was admitted to practice on September 15th in 1966. And I gave my first CLE speech in October, the next month. And I started teaching school the following January, and I taught for 25 years. And during the years of speaking, I've spoken in all 50 states. I've spoken in 12 foreign countries. I've spoken in 6 of the 12 Canadian provinces. And I don't hold anything back. I don't have any secrets. I try to teach people things they can use. My goal is to tell you something you can use in trial on Monday. As soon as you get back to the office, I got something new I want to try. And so I give back by education and by sharing everything. A lot of people won't ever share their PowerPoint presentations. Oh, no, it took me too long. I post my PowerPoint presentations on my website, and you can. They're there for everybody to use. And I write articles, and I make everything available to anybody that can be that it'll help as long as you're on the plaintiff side.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to give back because it's rewarding.
Yeah.
Because by speaking, it's kind of like the Army language school where you don't have any choice about doing this. You got to do it. You got to do it right, and you got to be the best at it. And by speaking, standing up in front of 1,000 lawyers or 500 lawyers or 10 lawyers, it doesn't matter. When you got to stand up in front of other lawyers and instruct them on their profession, you better be good and you better be right. And you better have something to say.
Yeah.
So it forces you to deep dive into whatever your topic is and put yourself in a position where you really understand it and where you think. It forces you to take the basics and then really think about it. What modification can I put to this that'll make it more useful to the people in the audience?
Yeah.
And it's so I learn more than anybody else in the room when I speak because I force myself to
You're
know
paying
what I'm.
attention.
Yeah. Sometimes I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say because I learn a lot from it.
So what else do you do? What I want to get a little more personal because I think this is a platform where I want lawyers, other than, show how to run their business and how they do what they do with running or working up cases. What moves you? What feeds your soul? What is important to you in your personal life? What is it that you do for yourself to stay in shape, to stay mentally fit, emotionally fit, all of those things?
Well, I've been a gym rat my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working out consistently with a trainer for 18 years, and then, but I do physical fitness perpetually. I always have ever since the military. I've never stopped. I've never not done workouts in the gym, and that's a big deal. And aerobics, I've also done the same thing. I'm big on aerobics. I've got the Techno Gym bike and the EFX and all that sort of thing. So that's one thing, because you got to. Being a trial lawyer is a hard job physically.
Yeah.
When you're in trial, it's devastatingly hard.
Yeah.
Because you don't sleep at night. You sleep a few hours.
You're consumed. Yeah.
You're perpetually second guessing yourself and rethinking things, and it's pretty exhausting.
Yeah.
And so you have to be fit to be a good trial lawyer. And but other than that, I love reading. I've always been a big reader, and my current love is Amanda Gorman. That is a phenomenal young woman. You saw her poetry at the inauguration.
I did. I have not bought the book or read.
A book was published in hardback yesterday.
Oh.
And I just called and ordered some, and I'm sending one to my granddaughter, and I'm sending them to people in the family, because just that one poem. But the whole idea, you need to watch her interview with Oprah.
Yeah,
it's up right now.
Okay.
And it's really worth it. But watching how this young woman at 24 years of age is so tuned in and so. It's amazing how she understands her own capabilities, and she has a plan for where she's going. She's going to run for president in 2036, and trust me, I wouldn't bet against her at this point. But just to see her mind work, how her mind works, and she talked about writing the poem that she used at the inauguration, and she said it would take her about a day. She would sit down to work in the morning, and she would work all day. And maybe at the end of the day, she might have one line that's good enough, because she said, I wasn't looking for any bronze. I wasn't looking for any silver. Every line had to be the gold medal winner. But seeing her minds like that, it just amazed me. I love geniuses. I love brilliant people.
Yeah.
And I've studied. I've read a lot of biographies from Da Vinci to Steve Jobs to
Yeah.
to Einstein, and it's you can learn a lot from how other people.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I love
Personal
biographies.
development,
Pardon?
do you do your personal development through reading books, or do you, because you've gone
Some
to
of each. When
Robin.
I used to run a lot, and when I ran a lot, I would listen to the self-help stuff on my recorder as I was running, and I'd listen to Tony Robbins and people like Tony as I ran, and that was always inspirational. And I also did a lot when I used to run 10Ks on a regular basis, and so I would listen to books on tape, and as often as not, it'd be biographies of great people. But it feeds the soul, you know, it inspires you.
And recently you were married.
I really was.
Woman called Wendy. How's married life treating you?
Wonderful. It's perfect, but improving.
Yeah. Good. What have you learned throughout your career when it comes to personal relationships and managing?
Well, one of the things you just mentioned is drinking. I drink absolutely nothing but wine. I don't drink any alcohol, don't use any drugs. And I gave up alcohol in Korea, actually. When I was in Korea, you buy alcohol in the military overseas, you buy it without taxes. So a fifth of Jack Daniels cost $1.05. And the result of that was being in Korea in those horrible conditions, with absolutely almost free booze. I saw a lot of people, a lot of smart people. These people were in the Army Security Agency, and they were in military intelligence. And I saw really, really, really smart people who came back from Korea as an alcoholic. You'd be bright-faced kids on the ship on the way over, and on the way back, you'd see a drunk. And I saw a lot of it, because if any place in the world that drive you to drink, it's Korea. It was back then. It was just unbelievably bad living conditions, and so it cured me. And so I said, I'm not going to do any more alcohol. So I came back and I went through 6 years of college and never had a sip of alcohol. And I went through my next sip of alcohol. My last sip was as I left Korea. We had a party that night. My next sip of alcohol was when I graduated, was when I won my first trial. And that was in November 66. So, and then, but then since then, I've discovered wine. So, and I love wine, and I drink, and I don't drink much. I drink occasionally. I drink wine. I drink wonderful wines, and that's it. I mean, because it's they recommend, the American Heart Association recommends 6 ounces of wine, red wine a day. The Diabetes Association recommends 6 ounces of red wine a day. There are 5 organizations that recommend 6 ounces of wine a day. So I try to keep up with all of them. So I drink 30 ounces of wine every day. So it's.
By the way, thank you for the wine over Christmas. It was wine. Thank you.
Silver Oak. Yeah.
Very, very good wine. You're also a foodie. You love food. And one of the things I enjoy so much when we travel, and we meet each other in these seminars, we get to go to dinner, and we get to and have these spectacular meals with spectacular wine. You've kind of spoiled me, I have to say.
Well, one of the things I truly miss about as a result of COVID are those things where we travel all over the country. We go to Mass Torts Make Perfect twice a year. We go to the summit. We go to the you may go to AAJ, and I mean, and then seminars all over the country. And but when we get there, the whole seminar is kind of incidental to it all. We're there with our best friends. We meet friends that we have all over the country. My best friends in the world are not in Houston. My best friends in the world are all over the country. And I have dinners with them all over the country. And we always eat at the best restaurants in town, and we drink the best wines, and we just have a great time together. We really do. And it's that's been the biggest downer. I went to dinner at Roko Accor here in town 2 weeks ago. And I realized, my wife and I were like, you realize this is the first time we've had dinner in a restaurant sitting at a table since March of last year. Mm-hmm. And that's a downer, it really is. But yeah, I enjoy good food, good wine. It's what life's about.
Life is about. And of course, the traveling, there is this, I love the traveling. It stretches my mind. It gives me space. It gives me the ability to gain perspective. And of course, international traveling, as you know, is out of the question still. But I'm itching. I want to get out. I feel confined. Yeah. It's been a very strange time, I think, for a lot of people. If you could go somewhere internationally, where would you go?
Right now, I would go to the northeastern corner of Costa Rica, the best fishing grounds in the world for tarpon and for snook. And I would fly to San Jose and take a private plane over to this one little spot in the northwest corner and go to this fishing location there and spend about a week doing nothing but deep sea fishing for tarpon, fishing the river, going up the Colorado River towards Managua, and just and don't ever let anybody tell you there are no freshwater sharks, because this place is full of the Colorado River is full of sharks. But catching a large tarpon when you're in a flatboat and you're sitting here or you're standing here and the tarpon is right there. He comes up out of the water and he's right there. He's 10 feet away and he's bigger than you are. And there are lessons you learn. If you do what the natural response is when he comes up, you would jerk it in like that. If you do, you pull him over right on top of you and he'll sink the boat. Now you're in the water with all those sharks.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, to say the least. So the scuba diving there is wonderful. It's great. That's where I would go right now. And that's where I used to hide when I just wanted to get away.
Yeah. You can't get away. I mean, are you planning on traveling soon?
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah.
I just, nah.
Too much of a risk, yeah.
I've got, we should be going to Mass Torts next week, or first week in April, next week. And then we should be going to the summit in Miami in May, and we should be going to AJ in July, all the usual, but I don't plan to do any of them right now. In fact, they're doing Mass Torts virtually this time.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little premature, but they're doing the summit in May in Miami. And I tell you, after what you've seen of Miami over the last 2 weeks, you see that chaotic scene in Miami. That would seem to be the home office for the coronavirus right about now. I don't think you could pay me enough to go to Miami.
Yeah. So shifting gears once more and perhaps getting a little bit more personal. Recently, you experienced a heartbreaking tragedy.
I did.
Your grandson, Chris.
Yes. Yes.
Young age of 32.
Yep.
A few months ago, so it's very recent. How are
Yes.
you and your family coping right now?
Well, it's incredibly bad loss. It was the worst minute. I've had a lot of minutes in my life, but the worst minute in my life was on February 9th at 1:32 a.m. when my daughter is calling me. She's saying 6 words that broke my heart. She said, "He didn't make it. He's dead." And that was Chris. And my grandson, and you met my grandson. You went to you attended Tony Robbins with my grandson and my granddaughter. And the granddaughter just gave birth to my second great granddaughter this past week. But yeah, the loss of a close family member, my grandson in this case, is devastating. I mean, absolutely devastating. I was inconsolable. I really was. And but we have to move on. We just have to assimilate it into our being, and move on. Mm-hmm. And then a couple of weeks later, I have another great granddaughter born. So it's a cycle of life.
Yeah. And your daughter Cindy is doing okay? Yeah,
she's down with her daughter, my granddaughter. And she was there for the birth of her grandchild. So yeah, she's living in. We have a home in Mexico, and so she's at our home in Mexico with my granddaughter and the great granddaughter, and she was there for the birth. She went down and stayed with her for the birth of the child, and now she'll probably stay there another 2 or 3 weeks, and then come on back.
Yeah.
But
so it's devastating, and I was devastated for you. With you, I think losing somebody, in this business, we deal with a lot of tragedy with our clients all the time. So we're sort of on the outside in some ways, but then we do get pulled in and we try to, be their advocate and help in any way we can. You as an attorney, me as a consultant, settlement specialist. So it's different when it's your family member and it hits home so close. Yeah. Realize nobody's immune to, to loss and death and tragedy. It's very difficult. I think it makes you want to pause and reset or recalibrate. And how are you recalibrating? And how are you trying to move on from this?
Well, you just have to accept the fact. I mean, this is God's plan for some reason. Wasn't my plan, but God didn't ask me about it. So I just have to accept what is. And my way of dealing with it is I remember all the good things about him. Mm-hmm. I remember when I took him fishing up in Canada, just south of the Arctic Circle. Mm-hmm. And we went fishing on a 6-day fishing trip where we caught brown trout that weighed 25, 30 pounds. Mm-hmm. And I thought he was going to jump out of the boat. It was just such a thrill. He was only 9 years old. And he was used to catching these little things like this at Lake Travis. And I waited and let him catch the first one, and because I wanted to see it. He had no idea. And he pulled the first one in, and he was struggling with it and pulled it in. And it was about a 19-pound brown trout. The first one, he was like, he couldn't believe it. He could not believe his eyes. So then he couldn't wait to get the line back in the water to catch the next one. But when I think of Chris, I think of things like that. I think of the things we did together. And the things the joy we had together, and the memories that we made together, and I hold those near and dear to my heart.
I wish you and your family nothing but love and healing during this difficult time, and I am
Thank
sure a
you.
lot of people are praying for you right now. So my last question is, what do you want your legacy to be? You have dedicated your entire life to the business of law, to helping other people. You've lived such a beautiful life. You're a beautiful human being. What do you want your legacy to be?
I'm not concerned. I'm not one of the legacy people. I'm not concerned with what my legacy is. Um, I know that the thing that I probably will be remembered as is probably as a teacher, a lecturer, from all the people, the thousands of people who have heard me speak over the years, and that hopefully they'll think of me as someone who gave them some advice that helped their career, or that helped them with a case. But my legacy is my family. It's going to be my children, my grandchildren, my great grandchildren now, and to start them off on the right foot, give them the right inspiration. I have two great granddaughters now. One of them is a week old, and the other one is 14 months old. And I got a picture of them. We had them on Zoom.
Yeah.
We had them meet on Zoom, and I was explaining to them on Zoom that someday they're going to be in about 23 years they're going to be going to law school at Vanderbilt together, and the older one is going to be. I've said, now this is your first cousin, and you're going to have to. She's going to be a year behind you at Vanderbilt, so she can use your textbooks, and you can tell her, you can give her your notes, save your notes to give to her. But I wouldn't try to influence these children. I mean, I told their mother, I said, I wouldn't influence these children any way at all. They can be any kind of lawyer they want to be. So, but
Yeah.
if I can just leave a legacy of a happy family behind me, I'll be thrilled. I've had, it's kind of funny. Percy Foreman was my hero when I was a young lawyer. Percy was just an incredible trial lawyer. And I told Percy, I said, Percy, you have to write a book. Mm-hmm. You have so many adventures in your life. He handled 800 capital murder cases. And I said, you have such an incredible legacy, but you need to write a book. And he said, I don't have time to write a book. I'm too busy making new adventures. Mm-hmm. So I told him, I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you will just sit down with me, we sit down, and he always go to the bar at the Rice Hotel at the end of every day. And I said, you sit at the bar at the Rice, I'll get a tape recorder and I'll ask you questions and you tell me stories, and I will ghostwrite your book. And he said, I just don't have time for it. I don't have time for it. And so fast forward 50 years, and my daughter started in on me about, you really have to write a book. You've got so many great stories and so many things you've done. And I said, I can't. I just don't have time to write a book. I'm too busy living it. I'm not through living the stories yet to stop and write about it. There may be something like when you stop to write about it, you have to admit it's over. That it's finished. It's over. Now you're looking back on it and writing about it. And I'm still too busy living it. And so then when I said that, I realized that that's exactly what Percy said to me 50 years ago. So, but
that's when you know you're fully living, right?
Yeah. So I might write a book someday, but I'm not. It's not at the top of my agenda. Yeah. Right now, I'm planning my 100th birthday party. So once I get that all planned, and I'm going to have Lior Suchard there, and you'll have to come, and I'll bring Lior in from Israel. And
I am there. No, look, you've left a legacy, I think, already, with everything that you've done, the people that you've impacted. I mean, you are one of my heroes. You are somebody that I look up to, that I adore, because I think you truly have the biggest heart. You're very compassionate and very trustworthy and loyal and all of those things that are very difficult to find in people these days. You're just a man of your word, and that goes a long way. And so for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the contribution to the justice system, to the legal system, to all the people that you've touched. On behalf of all of them, thank you. And I can't wait to see you again in person and continue living in the moment and celebrating life. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And coming from you, that's memorable.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you are notified whenever a new episode is posted. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, this is Mirena Umizaj, bringing heart into the business of law.